The hum of the Whisperdome was a lullaby Lyra had known since before she could remember. It was the soft thrum of air purifiers, the gentle whisper of nutrient recyclers, the barely perceptible vibration of the grav plates beneath her feet. It was the sound of home, safe and steady, orbiting a pale blue marble that shimmered with distant, forgotten lights. Outside Lyra's window, the stars were pinpricks of diamond on velvet, so dense, they formed shimmering rivers of light. But her window was a viewing pane, designed for comfort, not clarity. It filtered the harsh cosmic rays, softened the stark contrasts, and presented a curated version of the universe. Beautiful, yes, but tamed. Lyra, however, preferred the wild, untamed truth. Every night, after her synth milk and story sphere, tonight it had been the tale of the ancient sky whales, whose songs had once navigated the void. Lyra would slip away. Not to the communal dream pods, where the dome's younger inhabitants shared guided narratives and restorative sleep, but to a quieter, more personal sanctuary. She would pad down the softly lit corridors, her bare feet silent on the recycled plasteel, past the sleeping chambers of her neighbors, past the murmuring hydroponic gardens where bioluminescent moss provided a gentle glow. Her destination was always the same: the Stellaris. The Stellaris wasn't a room, not really. It was more of a communion, a living chamber nestled at the very heart of the Whisperdome's observation deck, shielded by layers of reactive plating, and powered by its own dedicated fusion core. It was the dome's oldest and most revered piece of technology, a relic from the initial colonization wave, designed to connect humanity with the true raw essence of the cosmos. As Lyra approached, the chamber's entrance shimmered, recognizing her unique biosignature. The opaque wall thinned, rippled like disturbed water, and then dissolved, inviting her into the cool, dark embrace beyond. Inside, there was no furniture, no screens, no visible technology beyond the faint, almost imperceptible lines of power conduits running along the floor. The entire spherical space was a seamless, crystal-clear viewport to the universe. But it wasn't just a window. The Stellaris was an interactive canvas, a sentient lens, capable of magnifying, filtering, and even interpreting the light that streamed through it. Lyra settled herself cross-legged on the cool floor, her favorite spot, directly at the chamber's geometric center. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence of the Stellaris wash over her, a silence deeper than any found elsewhere in the Whisperdome. It was the silence of the void itself, a vast resonant emptiness that always made her feel both tiny and infinitely connected. Then, with a soft breath, she opened her eyes. And the universe unfolded. The Stellaris didn't just yee-shaw the stars, it immersed her in them. The transparent walls dissolved into pure light, projecting the cosmos around her in breathtaking, unfiltered glory. Nebulae swirled in vibrant hues of magenta and emerald, their gaseous tendrils stretching across unimaginable distances. Distant galaxies, spiral and elliptical, hung like cosmic jewelry, each pinprick of light a sun to 1,000 worlds. And the stars, oh the stars! They burned with an intensity that made the filtered view from her bedroom window seem like a dim candle. Blues so deep they verged on violet, reds that pulsed with ancient heat, whites that blazed with the fury of creation. Lyra reached out a hand, tracing the outline of a particularly bright cluster, the Pleiades, that always seemed to wink back at her. The Stellaris, sensing her focus, subtly zoomed in, bringing the cluster closer, resolving individual stars from what had been a hazy blue smudge. She could almost feel the heat, the stellar winds, the raw energy emanating from those distant suns. It was her nightly ritual. She would spend hours here, not just observing, but feeling the universe. The Stellaris, in its ancient wisdom, seemed to facilitate this connection. It wasn't just visual. Sometimes, if she focused hard enough, she could almost hear the deep hum of a nascent star, or the faint, ghostly whispers of cosmic background radiation, a primordial echo of the universe's birth. Tonight, however, felt different. As Lyra gazed at a familiar patch of sky, a dark rift in the Milky Way, she noticed a subtle shift. The Stellaris, usually so stable in its projection, seemed to flicker, a barely perceptible ripple across the cosmic tapestry. It was like a single pixel on a massive screen momentarily losing its color, then regaining it. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her. She focused again on the dark rift, a region known as the Coalsack Nebula, a vast cloud of dust and gas that obscured the stars behind it. It was a favorite spot for Lyra. She found a strange comfort in its impenetrable darkness, a promise of hidden wonders. The flicker happened again, this time more pronounced. It wasn't a glitch in the projection, it was an eye pulse. A faint rhythmic thrum, not visual, but almost tactile, reverberating through the chamber. It felt like a heartbeat, or perhaps a distant drum. Lyra sat up straighter, her curiosity fully engaged. The Stellaris had always been perfectly stable, its ancient systems flawlessly maintaining the cosmic display. She'd never known it to falter, not even during the rare solar flares that occasionally buffeted the Whisper Dome. "Stellaris?" she whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast silence. "Is something wrong?" The chamber offered no verbal response, of course. The Stellaris communicated through light, through projection, through subtle shifts in its immersive display. But as she spoke, the rhythmic pulse intensified slightly, and the flickering in the Coalsack Nebula became more defined. It wasn't random. It was Y-patterning. A faint, almost imperceptible glow began to emanate from within the heart of the Coalsack, a region that should have been utterly dark. It was a deep, almost indigo light, unlike any stellar emission Lyra had ever seen. It pulsed, in perfect sync with the rhythmic thrum she felt. The Stellaris then did something truly extraordinary. Without any conscious command from Lyra, the projection shifted. It began to zoom in, not on a star, not on a nebula, but on that specific point within the Coalsack. The dark gas clouds parted, as if drawn aside by an invisible hand, revealing the source of the indigo light. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a nebula. It was a structure. A colossal, intricate, impossibly delicate structure, woven from light itself. It shimmered with the same indigo hue, its complex lattice work extending for what must have been light years, stretching through the void like a celestial spiderweb. It was utterly alien, yet possessed a breathtaking, almost organic beauty. Its geometry was fluid, shifting and reforming with each pulse, as if breathing. Lyra gasped, her breath catching in her throat. She had seen countless marvels projected by the Stellaris, supernovas, black holes, the birth of galaxies. But this was different. This was constructed in. This was Jalavang. And then she noticed something else. Embedded within the structure, at what appeared to be its central nexus, was a single, impossibly bright point of pure white light. It didn't pulse like the rest of the structure. It glowed with a steady, unwavering intensity, a beacon in the indigo sea. The Stellaris continued its silent, relentless zoom, bringing the structure closer and closer. Lyra felt a strange sensation, a pull, a magnetic draw towards that distant, impossible light. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a counterpoint to the rhythmic thrum emanating from the structure. She reached out her hand again, not tracing this time, but extending it towards the glowing construct. As her fingers stretched, the structure seemed to respond. A thin filament of indigo light detached itself from the main lattice, and slowly, deliberately, began to extend towards her, mirroring her movement in the vastness of space. It was impossible. The Stellaris projected light, it didn't create physical connections. Yet, the filament of light felt real, almost tangible, as it grew closer, traversing the simulated distance between them. The thrum intensified, vibrating through Lyra's very bones. The air in the chamber grew charged, tingling with an unfamiliar energy. The whisper of the Whisper Dome was utterly forgotten. There was only the Stellaris, the indigo structure, and the approaching filament of light. It reached her. Not physically. But something profound happened. As the tip of the indigo light met her outstretched finger in the projection, Lyra felt a sudden jolt. Not painful, but deeply resonant. It was as if a circuit had closed, a connection forged across unimaginable distances. And then, a flood. Not of images, not of words, but of pure information. It cascaded into her mind, a torrent of sensation, meaning, and emotion. She saw fragmented visions. Swirling nebulae, yes, but also ancient starships. Their hulls scarred by cosmic dust. The silent, watchful gaze of beings she couldn't comprehend. the deep resonant echoes of music woven from solar flares and gravitational waves. But more than visions, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. A longing. A deep, abiding stillness. And then, a single word, not spoken but understood, resonating within the deepest chambers of her mind. Est. The connection was too intense, too sudden. Lyra cried out, a small, involuntary sound, and recoiled her hand. Immediately the indigo filament retracted, dissolving back into the main structure. The rhythmic thrum subsided, though a faint echo remained. The Stellaris pulled back its zoom, the impossible structure receding once more into the heart of the Kolzak Nebula, becoming a distant, shimmering mystery again. Lyra sat trembling, her heart still racing. Her mind reeled, trying to process the deluge of information, the profound, alien contact. The word, est, echoed in her thoughts, unfinished, enigmatic. What was that? What had just happened? She looked around the Stellaris chamber, now returned to its usual stable projection of the cosmos. Everything seemed normal, yet nothing was. The profound silence of the void now felt charged with an unspoken secret. Lyra got up, her legs feeling unsteady. She walked to the edge of the chamber, pressing her hand against the transparent wall, now merely a window again. The stars outside were still beautiful, still distant. But she knew now, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that they held secrets far deeper than she had ever imagined. She had to tell someone. But who? Her dome mother, Ilara, would listen, of course. But how could Lyra explain a sentient cosmic structure, a mental download, a single unfinished word? It sounded like the plot of one of her story spheres, not reality. Lyra's mind raced. The Whisperdome was a place of peace, of carefully managed routine. Disruptions were rare, and profound mysteries were usually left to the lorekeepers, the dome's archivists and cultural historians, who studied ancient texts and galactic charts. But this wasn't ancient history. This was Inov. She decided to try to interact with the Stellaris again, more carefully this time. She returned to her spot, closed her eyes and focused, trying to recall the feeling of connection. Stellaris, she whispered. Show me. Show me yet again. The Stellaris remained passive, displaying the vast unchanging panorama of the night sky. It wasn't responding to her direct request. It was as if the fleeting connection had been a unique event, perhaps a moment of accidental synchronicity. Or perhaps it was waiting for her to understand something first. Lyra felt a pang of frustration, quickly followed by a surge of determination. She wouldn't give up. The feeling of that immense, ancient structure, its purpose, the longing it projected, it had resonated deeply within her. It felt like a part of her own hidden longing, a yearning for something beyond the comfortable confines of the Whisperdome. She spent another hour in the chamber, meticulously scanning the Kolzak Nebula with her eyes, trying to find any residual trace of the indigo structure. But it was gone, or perhaps simply too faint for the Stellaris to highlight, without specific prompting. The dark rift remained dark, a cosmic void, as if the dazzling construct had been nothing more than a vivid, hyper-real dream. But it hadn't been a dream. Memory of the contact, the jolt, the flood of information, the word, est. It was etched into her mind, sharper than any memory she possessed. Reluctantly, as the first hint of the dome's internal sunrise cycle began to glow softly along the corridors, Lyra left the Stellaris. The entrance shimmered closed behind her, sealing away the secrets of the cosmos, at least for now. As she walked back to her sleeping chamber, the Whisperdome's familiar hum felt different. It was no longer just a lullaby. It was a backdrop, a thin veil separating her from an incredible, terrifying, beautiful truth. The universe was not just stars and nebulae. It was structures, and purpose, and communication. And she, Lyra, a mere child in a small orbital habitat, had been chosen to receive a fragment of its message. She slipped back into her room, the soft glow of the synth morning already illuminating the space. Her sleep mat felt foreign, her pillow too soft. Her mind was buzzing, wide awake. She tried to piece together the fragmented visions. Ancient starships. Watchful beings. Music of the cosmos. And that pervasive sense of Stillness. What did it all mean? The word. East? Stellar? Structure? Story. She ran through every possibility she knew. But none of them quite fit the profound, resonant feeling that had accompanied the word. It felt like a name, a designation, a beginning. As the Dome Mother Ilara often said, the universe speaks in riddles, Lyra. But every riddle has an answer, if you listen closely enough. Lyra decided she would listen. Closely. The next day passed in a blur of routine. Hydroponic lessons, where she learned about optimal nutrient cycling for the dome's food supply. Gravball practice, where she excelled at navigating the low-gravity court. Shared mealtimes in the communal refectory, where the other children chattered about their dream-pod adventures and upcoming recreational sims. Lyra participated, but her mind was elsewhere, constantly replaying the events in the Stellaris. She observed the other inhabitants of the Whisperdome, trying to see if any of them carried the same spark of cosmic wonder, the same latent curiosity that might allow them to understand. But they all seemed content, engaged in their daily lives, their gazes rarely extending beyond the filtered view screens of their living quarters. They lived in space but rarely truly looked at it. Except for one. Kale. Kale was older than Lyra by several cycles. He was an apprentice lore keeper, often found hunched over ancient data slates in the dome's archives, or meticulously cataloging new astrogation charts. He was quiet, thoughtful, and had a reputation for possessing an encyclopedic knowledge of galactic history and stellar cartography. More importantly, he was one of the few individuals Lyra knew who regularly spent time in the Stellaris, not just for observation, but for eye study aid. During her gravball practice, Lyra saw Kale making his way towards the observation deck. His usual route to the archives took him through the lower levels, but today he seemed drawn upwards towards the Stellaris. A flicker of hope ignited within Lyra. Could he have sensed something? Was the Stellaris communicating with others? She finished her practice abruptly, abandoning her teammates mid-game, and quickly followed Kale. She kept a respectful distance, not wanting to disturb his focused stride. She watched as he approached the Stellaris chamber, the entrance shimmering open for him just as it did for her. Lyra hesitated. Her first instinct was to rush in, to share her incredible experience. But something held her back. The connection had been so personal, so profound. Would Kale even believe her? Or would he, like her dome mother, dismiss it as a vivid dream? She decided to wait, to observe. Maybe Kale would reveal something. Maybe the Stellaris would show him the structure again. She sat down on a recessed bench near the Stellaris entrance, pretending to be engrossed in a portable story sphere, but her attention was entirely focused on the chamber. The entrance remained open. A soft, inviting darkness. She could feel the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the Stellaris, a different hum now, imbued with new meaning. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Lyra mentally reviewed every detail of her contact. The indigo light, the intricate lattice, the steady white beacon, the rhythmic thrum, the flood of information, and the single unfinished word. Est. What if it was a warning? Or an invitation? Or a plea? The entrance to the Stellaris shimmered again, and Kale emerged. He looked different. His usual calm, studious expression was replaced by a subtle tension. His eyes, usually focused and observant, seemed distant, preoccupied. He didn't notice Lyra. He simply stood for a moment, gazing out at the filtered stars through the main observation deck's massive viewport, his brow furrowed in thought. Lyra gathered her courage. "Kale?" she called out softly. He started, surprised, turning to see her. "Lyra," he said, his voice a little strained. "I didn't see you there." "I was just resting," Lyra replied, gesturing vaguely at her story sphere. She stood up, slowly approaching him. "Were you in the Stellaris?" Kale hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, just now. Did you see anything unusual?" Lyra asked, trying to keep her voice even, but a tremor of excitement made it betray her. Kale looked at her sharply, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He glanced back at the Stellaris entrance, then at the filtered stars outside. He took a deep breath. "Lyra," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I saw a structure, a vast construct of light, unlike anything I've ever encountered in any archive, any chart. It was in the coal sack, pulsing. Lyra's heart leaped. He had seen it. She wasn't alone. Yes, she exclaimed, unable to contain her excitement. The indigo light? And a white beacon inside. I saw it too last night. Cale's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and profound understanding dawning in them. Last night? You saw it last night? Yes. And it reached out to me, Cale. A filament of light, it connected with me. And I felt things. Heart of a word, or part of a word. Lyra recounted her experience in a rush of words, the story tumbling out of her, now that she had someone who understood. Cale listened intently, his expression shifting from astonishment to deep contemplation. When she finished, he didn't dismiss her, didn't question her sanity. Instead, he looked at her with a new kind of intensity. A connection, he murmured, almost to himself. And a word. An incomplete word. He paused, looking back at the Stellaris. The Stellaris has been restless these past few days. A subtle shift in its energy signatures, a faint resonance that the lore keepers have been trying to interpret. We thought it was just a minor anomaly, perhaps a distant gravitational wave affecting its delicate sensors. It's not an anomaly, Lyra stated firmly. It's a message. From Idi Darkuri. She pointed towards the Coalsack Nebula, visible even through the filtered viewport. Cale nodded slowly. I believe you. What word did you hear, Lyra? Lyra hesitated, then whispered, St. Cale closed his eyes, his brow furrowed in thought, then opened them. St. He repeated, testing the sound. I felt something similar, not a word, but a profound resonance, a sense of enstasis, or perhaps enstellarize itself, but deeper, more fundamental. It felt like a name, Lyra insisted. Or a beginning. A beginning, Cale mused. He walked over to a nearby data display, activating it with a wave of his hand. Ancient star charts shimmered into existence, mapping the known galaxy. He zoomed in on the Coalsack Nebula. The lore keepers have long theorized about the Coalsack. It's a region of intense dark matter, a cosmic void that seems to absorb all light. But some ancient texts from the pre-flight era spoke of a great stillness within the Coalsack, a place where time itself might be different. Stillness, Lyra repeated, remembering the feeling that had flooded her mind. Yes, that was part of it. A deep, abiding stillness. Cale's eyes gleamed with a quiet excitement. The Lore Keeper's archives also contain fragments of what are called stellar echoes, faint, non-gravitational signals that some believe are ancient transmissions, lost in the cosmic background noise. They are too weak, too fragmented, to ever truly decipher. But if this structure, if each truly is what we think it is. He trailed off, looking at Lyra. You said it connected with you. A flood of information. What else did you see? What else did you feel? Lyra struggled to articulate the experience. Ancient ships, beings, music, a sense of purpose, a longing. She paused, trying to find the right words. It felt like it was waiting for something, or someone. Cale nodded slowly. The great stillness, the stellar echoes, and now, a living structure communicating across light years. It seems the universe is finally ready to reveal one of its oldest secrets, Lyra. And it chose you to be its first listener. He looked at her, his expression serious. This is not something we can share with just anyone, Lyra. The Whisper Dome is a place of peace, of stability. News of an active, sentient, possibly ancient alien structure in the Coalsack would cause considerable disruption, panic even, especially if it's something the lore keepers have only ever whispered about in hushed tones. But we have to tell someone, Lyra protested. What if it's important? What if it needs help? It has existed for millennia, Lyra, Cale said gently. It has waited. And it has chosen its moment to reveal itself. We must be careful. We must understand it first. The Stellaris. It chose you for a reason. And it showed me enough to know that this is real. But we need to approach this with wisdom, not fear. He leaned closer, his voice dropping even lower. I have access to the deep archives, Lyra. The ones that are usually restricted even to junior lore keepers. Ancient logs, theoretical physics, xenolinguistics. I believe the key to understanding Einstein lies there. And in the Stellaris itself, if we work together, quietly, discreetly, we might be able to piece together its message, and figure out what it wants, or what it wants, or what it jade. Lyra felt a thrill of adventure, mixed with a healthy dose of trepidation. This was bigger than any story sphere, more real than any simulation. This was the universe, calling. Okay, she breathed, her voice firm. We'll do it, together. Cale smiled, a rare, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Good. Tonight, Lyra, meet me here after everyone else is asleep. We'll consult the Stellaris again, and I will bring a neural interface slate from the archives. Perhaps if we can establish a more controlled connection, we can delve deeper into the information you received. But remember, he cautioned, absolute discretion. Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant, filtered stars. The word, Ingst, resonated in her mind, no longer a fragment, but a promise. A promise of discovery, of understanding, of a journey she had only ever dreamed of. The quiet hum of the whisper dome now felt less like a lullaby, and more like a prelude to something vast and magnificent. The stars were listening. And for the first time, Lyra felt truly heard. The stars were listening. And for the first time, Lyra felt truly heard. She stood for a long moment, the hum of the whisper dome fading into the background of her thoughts. The elder's words, his cautionary glance, the weight of the fragment saint, clung to her like a forgotten nebula. She finally turned, her steps echoing softer than usual on the polished synth floor, as she made her way back to her personal hab unit. Her sanctuary of muted light and carefully curated comfort usually soothed her, but tonight it agitated her. The single window, an optical illusion displaying a perpetually serene sunset over an alien ocean, pulsed with soft, warm hues. The artificial calm felt like a shroud over a restless mind. She moved to her central console, a sleek, translucent data slate that projected holographic interfaces. Her fingers hovered over the controls, a familiar dance she performed daily for her assigned academic simulations. But tonight, she wasn't interested in theoretical xenolinguistics or orbital mechanics. She needed answers. Saint. The fragment shimmered in her mind's eye. Her society, the enclave of Astrea, was meticulously structured, its history carefully curated. Knowledge, especially about the great exoduses, the ancestral journey that brought them to this domed sanctuary, was disseminated in controlled bursts. Anything beyond the approved narratives was simply not discussed. Lyra initiated a silent, low-priority query on her personal terminal, routing it through an encrypted subnetwork that she'd discovered years ago, a digital hideaway she'd cultivated out of sheer adolescent curiosity. It was rudimentary, barely a whisper in the vast data stream of the enclave, but it was Herske. She typed the fragment, then added a series of common suffixes, letting the algorithm sift through the approved historical archives. A starship. No. Too generic. A starport. No. Their current port was Astrea Landing. On die Starfall? A historical cataclysm, but nothing began with Saint. Her pulse quickened. The Elder had chosen her, entrusted her. This wasn't a game. This was a E.I. secrecy. She closed her eyes, trying to recall the Elder's intonation, the way his lips had almost formed the full word before he stopped. It wasn't a short word. It had depth, resonance. Then it clicked. A half-forgotten lullaby from her childhood, sung by an old-world databot before it was decommissioned for anachronistic programming. The lyrics were garbled, mostly about faraway lights and a journey. One word, however, always stood out, a name whispered with reverence. Stellara. Her breath hitched. Lyra typed it into the hidden search bar. The system word, a faint internal hum that was usually imperceptible. The first results were expected: academic papers on stellar cartography, astronomical data, poetic references to stellar beauty. But then, deeper within the unmonitored layers of the subnetwork, something flickered. A faded entry. A single line, almost an anomaly, buried beneath layers of benign data. Galera, project designation. Status, classified level Omega. Her fingers froze above the console. Level, Omega. That wasn't just classified, that was forbidden. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet hab unit. The Elder hadn't just given her a piece of a puzzle. He'd handed her a key to a locked vault. The sheer audacity of it. To even search for a level Omega term could flag her. But the subnetwork was holding. For now. She delved deeper, bypassing the standard search protocols, trying to access the metadata of the Stellara entry. It was like trying to find a single grain of sand on a vast digital beach. But Lyra was patient. She'd spent years honing her data-sifting skills, not for academic pursuit, but for the sheer thrill of understanding how information flowed, how it was controlled. Finally, after what felt like an hour, a flicker. Not the information itself, but a wankwing. An old broken link, pointing to a server that no longer existed within the Enclave's known architecture. It was a phantom, a digital ghost. But ghosts often left echoes. Lyra leaned back, her mind racing. Stellara. Project designation. ... Level Omega. What could it be? A weapon? A lost colony? A secret mission? The sheer weight of the information, or rather, the lackey of it, was deafening. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that her journey had just truly begun. The stars weren't just listening. They were beckoning. And Lyra, for the first time, felt the irresistible pull of a destiny far grander than her carefully ordered life within the Enclave. She knew she couldn't sleep. Not with Stellara humming in her mind. The next few cycles were a blur of simulated classes and clandestine research. Lyra maintained her perfect academic record, her public persona unblemished, while her nights became a labyrinthine exploration of the Enclave's forgotten digital byways. She sought not direct data on Stellara, which was too heavily encrypted, but echoes, mentions in archived logs, cross-referenced project IDs, unusual data spikes around the time the Stellara entry was last modified. Her most promising lead came not from a data stream, but from an old discarded data crystal she unearthed in the Enclave's forgotten archives, a physical repository rarely accessed in an age of quantum storage. The crystal, marked with an obsolete pre-Exodus era symbol, contained fragments of what appeared to be a ship manifest. It was corrupted, fragmented, but Lyra, using her personal neural interface, managed to reconstruct several key data points. Among the crew listings amidst names and designations, a recurring annotation appeared. Stellara contingent. These individuals, she noticed, were all listed with unusually high-level clearances, even for their specialized roles. Their personal files were almost entirely redacted, a level of secrecy beyond even standard military protocols. They vanished from public record shortly after the Great Exodus. This wasn't just a project. This was a Ye people. A specific group, seemingly erased from history. The mystery deepened, and with it, Lyra's resolve solidified. Her world, Astraea, was a marvel of ecological engineering. A perfectly balanced closed system designed to sustain life indefinitely on a barren planet. They were taught that it was humanity's last, best hope, a testament to their ancestors' ingenuity after Earth became uninhabitable. But if Stellara was a project involving a contingent of people, what was their purpose? Were they a lost ark? A backup? Or something more sinister? She remembered Elder Kale's words, absolute discretion. He hadn't just warned her of the Enclave surveillance, but of the implications of what she might uncover. He knew. He had to. Lyra decided she needed to speak with him again, but not in the controlled environment of the Whisper Dome. She needed a place where the walls didn't listen, where the air didn't hum with latent sensors. Her opportunity came during the weekly community outreach initiative, where younger Enclave citizens volunteered to assist the elders with various tasks. Lyra chose the hydroponics garden maintenance shift, knowing Elder Kale often spent his afternoons tending to the rare bioluminescent flora cultivated there. It was a place of quiet contemplation, where the rustling of leaves and the gentle gurgle of nutrient solutions could mask conversation. She found him amidst a grove of glowing blue moss, his hands carefully pruning a spiraling vine that pulsed with soft green light. His face, etched with the wisdom of centuries, held a familiar serenity. "Elder Kale," Lyra greeted, her voice calm, though her heart pounded. He looked up, his eyes, like deep wells reflecting ancient starlight, met hers. A flicker of knowing passed between them. "Lyra, a pleasure to see you away from the data streams." He gestured to a patch of iridescent fungi. "These require a delicate touch. Their spores are sensitive to synthetic light." Lyra knelt, carefully assisting him. "I've been considering our last conversation," he hummed, continuing his work. "Observations are the seed of understanding, child." "You spoke of Saint," she began, keeping her voice low, "and I believe I've found the full word. Stellara." Elder Kale paused, his pruning tool suspended mid-air. He didn't look surprised. Instead, a faint, almost imperceptible sadness touched his features. "A formidable word, Lyra. And a heavy one. It's classified level Omega," she stated, watching his reaction. "Indeed," he confirmed, resuming his pruning. "As it must be." "Why?" Lyra pressed. "What is Stellara?" "I found references to a Stellara contingent in pre-Exodus records. People, Elder. People who simply vanished." He sighed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. "They did not vanish, Lyra. They embarked on a journey. A journey that was deemed too perilous, too uncertain to be shared with those who remained behind." "Remained behind?" Lyra's mind reeled. "You mean, not everyone came to Astraea?" "Astraea was a sanctuary, Lyra. A haven for those who sought stability, structure, and the promise of a predictable future. But not everyone shared that vision. Some believed humanity's destiny lay not in finding a new home, but in creating one, amongst the stars themselves." He looked directly at her then, his gaze piercing. "Stellara was not a ship, Lyra. It was a fleet knee. A fleet of generation ships, designed to travel beyond the known systems, to seek out truly virgin worlds, untouched by the echoes of humanity's past mistakes. A grand, audacious, almost impossible gamble." Lyra felt a profound sense of awe and dread wash over her. A fleet? A journey beyond the known? Her entire understanding of history, of her place in the universe, was shattering around her. "But why is it forbidden knowledge?" she whispered, the bioluminescent garden feeling suddenly vast and menacing. "Because, child," Elder Kale's voice was low, heavy with generations of silence, "the Astraean consensus, the founders of our enclave, believed that the truth of Stellara would destabilize our carefully constructed peace. The idea that another path was chosen, that a part of humanity still drifts in the void, perhaps facing unimaginable hardships, or perhaps achieving unimaginable glory. It was deemed too distracting." "So they erased it?" Lyra asked, her voice barely audible. "They buried it," he corrected. "Deep, Lyra. So deep that only fragments remain. Fragments for those with the patience and the heart to find them." He paused, meeting her gaze once more. "You have that heart, Lyra. And now, you carry a heavy secret." The weight of Elder Kale's revelation pressed down on Lyra, a palpable presence in the quiet hydroponics garden. A fleet. Generation ships. Humanity adrift seeking new worlds. It was a story both terrifying and exhilarating, a stark contrast to the comfortable, predictable existence within the enclave of Astraea. Her carefully constructed reality, built on the foundations of a singular, heroic exodus, had crumbled into dust. She felt a strange mix of emotions: betrayal that such a monumental part of their history had been hidden, and an insatiable hunger for more. The filtered stars outside the Whisperdome, which she had always viewed as distant, beautiful ornaments, now seemed to pulse with the silent cries of her lost kin. "What happened to them?" Lyra asked, her voice hushed, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace of the garden. "Did they succeed? Did they find a new home?" Elder Kale shook his head slowly. "We do not know. Communication was lost within a century of their departure, the distances involved, the nascent jump drive technology. It was always a gamble. For a time, Monitoring stations were maintained, listening for any signal, any whisper across the void. But as the generations passed, and no word came, hope dwindled. The project was officially decommissioned, its existence expunged from all but the highest, most restricted art. But you remember, Lyra observed. You and others? Some of us carry the echoes of the past, he confirmed. We believe that knowledge, even painful knowledge, is essential for true understanding. The Astraean consensus believes in protection through ignorance. We believe in growth through truth. His gaze softened. That is why I spoke to you, Lyra. You have a restless curiosity, a spirit that seeks beyond the comfortable confines of our dome. You are one of the few who might be able to truly understand the implications of Stellara. What implications? That we are not alone, Elder Kale said simply. That humanity's future is not singular. And that perhaps our own path here, safe and secure, might not be the only definition of success. He paused, then added, there is a reason the consensus guards this secret so fiercely. They fear that knowledge of Stellara might inspire a similar yearning in our people, a yearning for the unknown, for the perilous journey, for a life beyond the dome. It could destabilize everything they have built. Lyra understood. The Enclave was a carefully balanced ecosystem, both physically and socially. Introducing the concept of a grand, risky adventure might shatter its equilibrium, igniting a hunger for exploration that their controlled society could not accommodate. Is there anything left? Lyra asked, a new determination hardening her voice. Any way to find out what happened to them? Any record? Any relic? Elder Kale looked around, his eyes scanning the hydroponics garden, as if seeking hidden listeners. He then leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The consensus did not destroy everything. Some objects deemed artifacts of historical significance but too sensitive for public display were placed in the deep vaults, secure, self-sustaining archives beneath the Enclave, accessible only by the highest-level custodians or those who know how to navigate the forgotten paths. A thrill shot through Lyra. The deep vaults? She knew of them, in theory. Legendary repositories of ancient tech and dangerous knowledge, spoken of in hushed tones by other students, mostly as a children's myth. The vaults contain more than just relics, Lyra, Elder Kale continued. They hold the memories of Stellara, the original schematics, the mission logs, the personal effects of the contingent. And, perhaps most crucially, the last known coordinates of their jump points before they vanished into the void. Coordinates. Lyra felt a surge of hope, a spark igniting in the vast darkness of the unknown. If we had those, we could send probes. We could listen again. A formidable task, Elder Kale cautioned, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. The deep vaults are not easily accessed, and the technology required to send probes capable of tracking a generation fleet across light years. That technology is not openly available in Astraea. It was deemed unnecessary for a people who had found their permanent home. But it exists, Lyra countered, her mind already racing through possibilities. The knowledge, the schematics for such technology, must be in the vaults too, if they were used for the Stellara fleet. He nodded slowly. Precisely. But accessing the vaults requires bypassing several layers of biometric and cognitive security, and even then finding the specific data within the vastness of the archive would be like finding a single drop of water in an ocean. I've spent my life sifting through oceans of data, Lyra said, a newfound confidence in her voice. And I have you, Elder. You know the way. Elder Kale's gaze was steady. I know enough of the way. But the journey into the vaults is one you must undertake mostly alone, Lyra. Direct involvement from an elder would trigger too many alarms. My role is to guide, to offer wisdom, not to act. He tapped a gnarled finger against his temple. However, there are subtle ways, clues embedded in the Enclave's public systems, designed by those who wished Stellara to be remembered, not forgotten. You will need to find them. And then you will need courage. He reached out, his hand gently grasping her wrist. Be careful, Lyra. The consensus maintains its peace with meticulous vigilance. Those who question too loudly, who dig too deeply, often find themselves reassigned to less stimulating duties. Or worse, their data privileges revoked entirely. Lyra met his gaze, her resolve unshakable. I understand the risks, Elder, but I have to know, for them, for us. He gave her a small, approving nod. Then your first step is to seek out the Librarian's Lament. An old, obscure data myth. It speaks of a hidden path within the Enclave's main library network. A path to knowledge that the consensus wishes to remain unread. The Librarian's Lament proved to be a far more intricate puzzle than Lyra had anticipated. It wasn't a direct data entry or a hidden file, but a series of cryptic allusions embedded within the Enclave's vast, publicly accessible library network. She spent the next few cycles immersing herself in ancient poetry, forgotten philosophical texts, and even decommissioned recreational holonovels, searching for the subtle patterns Elder Kale had hinted at. Her breakthrough came not through logic but intuition. She noticed a peculiar recurring anomaly in the metadata of certain archive texts, a sequence of seemingly random characters that, when cross-referenced with a specific historical cipher used during the early days of the Exodus, revealed a fragmented message. It was a digital breadcrumb trail, painstakingly laid by someone long ago. The message led her to a specific section of the virtual library, a collection of pre-Exodus architectural schematics of Astrea itself. Within these complex blueprints, Lyra found a single, almost imperceptible inconsistency. A ventilation shaft that appeared to dead end on the official plans, yet showed a faint, almost ghost-like extension in the historical records. A forgotten passage. It was real. The deep vaults weren't just a myth. They were physically integrated into the very foundations of Astrea. Lyra now faced her first physical challenge. The ventilation shaft was located in a restricted zone, a service corridor beneath the Enclave's primary power conduits. Access required a Level 3 maintenance override, something Lyra, as an academic student, was not authorized to possess. She knew one person who might have such access. Jax, a rough-around-the-edges engineering apprentice she occasionally crossed paths with during her data-sifting excursions. Jax was notorious for bending rules, and possessed a knack for acquiring obscure technical overrides. He also had a soft spot for Lyra, admiring her quiet intelligence and fierce independence. Lyra approached Jax during his break cycle, finding him hunched over a sputtering conduit in the sublevels, his synth gloves smeared with biogel. "Jax," she said, her voice carefully casual. He looked up, his face smudged, a grin spreading across it. "Lyra, what brings the resident genius to the grime and glory of the conduits? Lost your way to the data stream?" "Something like that," she replied, lowering her voice. "I need a favor. A specific override for a Level 3 access panel. For a personal research project." Jax raised an eyebrow, wiping his hands on a rag. "Level 3. That's serious clearance, Lyra. That's for system-critical infrastructure. What kind of personal research needs to tinker with the primary power grid?" "It's not the power grid itself," Lyra clarified, choosing her words carefully. "It's an old ventilation shaft, marked as decommissioned. I believe there might be some forgotten structural data relevant to a historical analysis I'm conducting." It was a flimsy excuse, but she hoped Jax's inherent curiosity and his trust in her would prevail. Jax studied her for a moment, his gaze sharp. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was off. But Lyra met his gaze steadily, projecting an air of earnest academic pursuit. "You know, Lyra," he said slowly, "people don't usually analyze forgotten structural data in restricted zones, especially not with Level Omega clearance lurking in the background." Lyra's breath caught. "Level Omega? What are you talking about?" Jax chuckled, a low rumbling sound. "I dabble in a few unauthorized networks myself, Lyra. Your little subnetwork isn't as invisible as you think. I saw your recent searches for Stellara. Level Omega, huh? That's a brave new world you're looking into." Panic flared in Lyra's chest. She had been so careful. But Jax, it seemed, was more adept at digital subterfuge than she'd given him credit for. I can explain," she started, but Jax waved a hand. "No need. I get it. Some secrets are too big to stay buried. You're looking for something the consensus doesn't want found. And you need a way into the abandoned sectors." He paused, his expression turning serious. "This isn't just about research, is it? This could get you into deep trouble, Lyra, really deep." "I know," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But it's important, Jax. More important than anything else. He looked at her, then at the sputtering conduit, then back at her. A long silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of the Enclave's life support systems. Lyra braced herself for a refusal, perhaps even a threat to report her. Instead, Jax let out a heavy sigh. All right, Lyra, I'll get you the override, but you owe me, big time, and if you get caught, I don't know you, understand? A wave of relief washed over Lyra, so potent it almost made her knees buckle. Understood. Thank you, Jax. Truly. Don't thank me yet, he grumbled, already pulling up a diagnostic tool on his wrist-mounted holopad. The override will be active for exactly 60 minutes, starting at 300 cycle. It's a one-time use. After that, it'll self-corrupt, and the system will flag any subsequent attempts. You get in, you get out. No loitering. 300 cycle, Lyra repeated, committing it to memory. The dead of night, when surveillance was minimal, and most of the Enclave was in stasis sleep. Perfect. As Jax finalized the override code and transferred it to her comm unit, Lyra felt a new layer of the world unveil itself. The Enclave wasn't just a place of controlled information, it was a place of hidden networks, of unspoken agreements, of individuals willing to risk their own security for a glimpse of truth. Jax, the irreverent engineer, was now an unlikely ally in her quest for Stellara. That night, as the digital clock on her console ticked towards 300, Lyra prepared. She donned a dark, lightweight utility suit, its fabric designed for quiet movement. She packed a small data reader, a multi-tool, and a compact light source. The hum of the Whisper Dome, which once felt like a comforting prelude, now seemed to mock her, a reminder of the carefully constructed lies she was about to unravel. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She was no longer just dreaming of journeys. She was embarking on one. The ventilation shaft, a dark, narrow passage, represented more than just a physical entry point. It was a symbolic threshold, leading her away from the manufactured peace of Estrella and into the unwritten dangerous history of Stellara. The stars were waiting, and Lyra was finally ready to step into the darkness and listen to their silent song. The ventilation shaft hummed with the stale air of Estrella, a final, familiar lullaby before the unknown. Lyra took a deep breath, the metallic tang filling her lungs, and pushed herself forward. The opening was tighter than she'd anticipated, a claustrophobic embrace of cold metal and shadowed angles. Dust motes, ancient and undisturbed, danced in the faint light, filtering from Estrella's core, a silent farewell to the world she'd known. Her heart thrummed against her ribs, a frantic drum beat against the silence of her journey. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, picturing the vastness of space, the glittering promise of Stellara. When she opened them, determination had replaced doubt. This was it. She wriggled, scraped, and pushed, inch by painstaking inch, her movements echoing the quiet struggle of a seed breaking through hard soil. The shaft sloped downwards, a narrow tunnel into the belly of the forgotten world. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, the tunnel widened. The hum of Estrella receded, replaced by a profound, echoing silence, broken only by the drip of water somewhere far below. Lyra slid out onto a narrow ledge, her boots finding purchase on crumbling, moss-slicked stone. The air here was different, cool, damp, and carrying the faint scent of earth, and something metallic, ancient, like a forgotten machine left out in the rain. Before her, the darkness was absolute, a velvet curtain concealing what lay beyond. She fumbled in her pocket for the tiny emergency light she'd pilfered from a maintenance spot. Its beam, thin and reedy, pierced the gloom, revealing a breathtaking sight. She wasn't in a sterile corridor, but a colossal cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls carved with intricate glowing patterns that pulsed with a faint internal light. Massive, root-like structures, thicker than Estrella's transport tubes, snaked across the floor and up the walls, some made of metal, others of what looked like petrified wood or crystal. This wasn't just a city. It was a living, breathing ruin, reclaimed by time, and something organic. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice swallowed by the immensity. No answer. Only the drip, drip, drip of water and the thrum of her own pulse. As she stepped deeper into the cavern, her light beam caught a glint of movement. A small spherical drone, no bigger than her fist, detached itself from a cluster of glowing fungi on a metallic root. It hovered silently, its single optical sensor, a soft blue light, fixing on her. Query: unauthorized entry detected. Identity protocol not recognized, a synthesized voice chirped, surprisingly gentle. State purpose. Lyra froze. She'd expected automated defenses but not something so curious. I'm Lyra. Estrella? I'm here to find Stellara. To hear the silent song. The drone tilted, its blue eye blinking. Silent song. Affirmative. My designation is Lumina 3, but you may call me Lumi. I have been dormant for standard cycle 1200. My primary directive, observation and maintenance of the Stellaris core. Secondary directive, assist designated personnel in accessing core data. Lyra's jaw dropped. You're part of Stellara? You've been here all this time? Affirmative. My power reserves were set to minimal. Your energy signature activated localized sensors. Are you a descendant of the Stellaris initiates? I don't know, Lyra admitted, a wave of awe washing over her. My people. They just say Stellara was abandoned. They built Estrella after. Lumi hovered closer, its blue light brightening. The Stellaris initiates did not abandon Stellara. They transcended it. And then, they built Estrella as a protective cocoon for those not yet ready for transcendence. It is a complex history. Transcendence? What does that mean? It means they heard the silent song, and it changed them. Lumi rotated, its blue eye sweeping across the cavern. This is the Atrium of Whispers. One of the first access points to the Stellaris core network. Follow me, Lyra. If you wish to understand, I can guide you. Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of trepidation and profound excitement. Lumi darted ahead, its blue light a beacon in the vastness. She followed, her small emergency light now superfluous. They moved through colossal, echoing halls, some choked with the glowing fungi and strange crystalline growths, others remarkably preserved. Lumi explained, its calm, synthesized voice weaving a tapestry of Stellara's past. Stellara was not just a colony, Lumi explained as they navigated a vast circular chamber lined with dormant holographic projectors. It was an endeavor. The Stellaris initiates believed that the universe was not silent, merely communicating on frequencies humanity had yet to perceive. They built arrays, observatories, and data processors that could listen to the universe's natural rhythms, the gravitational waves from colliding black holes, the echoes of the Big Bang, the subtle shifts in cosmic background radiation, the very hum of spacetime. The silent song, Lyra breathed, understanding dawning. Precisely. It wasn't a melody, Lyra, not as you understand it. It was information, pure, unadulterated truth, the fabric of existence laid bare. Lumi led her through a labyrinth of crystalline conduits, pulsating with a faint internal light. This is a bioluminescent data conduit. It sustained the core's ancillary systems. Many of these pathways are still active, thanks to the self-repair protocols of the Stellaris network. They encountered other dormant drones, larger than Lumi, integrated into the architecture. Some stirred as Lyra passed, their optical sensors flickering to life, but Lumi's presence seemed to reassure them. They were guardians, witnesses to a history Lyra was only just beginning to grasp. Days blurred into a timeless journey. Lyra learned to conserve her rations, to sleep curled in ancient, surprisingly comfortable data chairs, and to trust Lumi implicitly. The drone showed her murals depicting the Stellaris initiates, not as scientists in lab coats, but as figures in flowing robes, their eyes turned skyward, surrounded by swirling patterns of light. They weren't just seeking knowledge, they were seeking enlightenment. She saw the technology of Stellara, not sleek, sterile designs like Estrella, but organic, flowing forms that integrated seamlessly with the natural rock and crystal formations. Giant energy collectors that drew power directly from the planet's core, atmospheric processors that purified the air with genetically engineered flora, and the omnipresent data network that hummed with the universe's quiet whisper. One day, they arrived at a colossal, circular chamber, its floor a polished expanse of obsidian-like material, reflecting the dazzling ceiling above. And what a ceiling it was! A holographic projection of the entire observable universe, rendered in breathtaking detail. Galaxies spun slowly, nebulae bloomed in vibrant colors, and distant quasars pulsed with otherworldly light. Lyra felt a profound sense of vertigo, as if she were standing at the very edge of creation. "This is the celestial nexus," Lumi announced, its blue light dimming slightly in reverence. "The primary interface to the Stellaris core. Here, the initiates gathered the song." In the center of the chamber stood a single massive console, an intricate web of crystalline keys and holographic displays, all dormant. Lyra approached it, her hands trembling. How do I hear it?" "The core requires a resonance signature," Lumi explained. A direct neural interface was the preferred method. However, the systems are severely depleted. To activate it, Lyra, you must provide a significant energy input. A bioenergetic pulse, focused through the console. Lyra looked at the intricate console, then at her own hands. "You mean, I have to touch it? Put my own energy into it?" Affirmative. The initiates believed true understanding came from direct personal connection. They imprinted their consciousness onto the core. It is the only way to awaken the dormant system sufficiently to transmit the song, even partially. A wave of fear washed over Lyra. This wasn't just exploring, this was a commitment. She remembered her dreams, her longing for the stars, the feeling of something just out of reach. This was it, the culmination of everything. She placed her hands on the smooth, cool surface of the console. A faint hum vibrated beneath her fingertips. Lumi hovered beside her, its blue light steady. "Breathe, Lyra," Lumi advised, its voice softer now. "Open your mind. Do not seek to control, but to receive. Let the current flow." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on her breath, on the steady rhythm of her own heart. She pictured the stars, not as distant pinpricks, but as vast, swirling entities, alive with energy. She imagined the longing that had driven her from Estrella, the yearning for truth, for connection. She poured all of it. Every dream. Every question. Every ounce of her spirit into her touch. A jolt, like static electricity, ran up her arms. The console beneath her hands began to glow, a soft internal luminescence spreading through its crystalline structure. The holographic universe above brightened, its colors deepening, its movements becoming more fluid, more real. Then, it began. It wasn't a sound she heard with her ears, but something that resonated deep within her bones, within the very fibers of her being. It was a symphony of light and shadow, of gravity and time, of creation and destruction. She saw the birth of stars, violent and beautiful, nebulae swirling like cosmic paint. She witnessed the slow, inexorable dance of galaxies, their arms spiraling through the void. She felt the ancient echoes of the Big Bang, a burst of pure energy that birthed everything. It wasn't overwhelming in its noise, but in its information. Every photon, every particle, every wave of energy in the universe seemed to speak to her, not in words, but in patterns, in relationships, in the intricate web of cause and effect that stitched reality together. She felt the vast cold emptiness between galaxies, and the incredible, vibrant life teeming within them. She understood, in a way that transcended language, the interconnectedness of all things. She saw the Stellaris initiates, not as images, but as a collective consciousness, their minds merged with the core, experiencing this same profound truth. They weren't just observing, they were a part of it. Their transcendence wasn't to another dimension, but to a state of being utterly immersed in the cosmic dance, their individual consciousnesses expanding to encompass the universal. And Lyra understood why Estrella existed. This truth, this silent song, was too much for most. It could shatter the ego, dissolve the sense of self, make individual human concerns seem utterly insignificant. The initiates, in their compassion, had created Estrella as a haven, a place where humanity could thrive in a manageable, comforting reality, protected from the overwhelming infinity. They hadn't abandoned humanity, they had protected it, while they themselves embraced a different path. The song was not about finding an answer, but about realizing there was no single answer, only an eternal unfolding question. It was the universe constantly reinventing itself, a perpetual becoming. It was terrifying in its scale, but also incredibly peaceful in its certainty. There was no beginning or end, only transformation. Lyra felt her own sense of self-dissolving, not into nothingness but into everything. She was a tiny speck, yet she contained the universe. She was Lyra, but she was also the starlight, the dust, the gravity. For a timeless moment, she was one with the silent song. Then, slowly, gently, the connection began to recede. The intensity softened, the colors muted, the echoes faded. Lyra felt herself pulling back like a diver returning to the surface after a profound journey into the deep. She opened her eyes, blinking away tears she hadn't known she was shedding. The celestial nexus was still glowing, but with a softer, more stable light. The holographic universe above still spun, but it felt less overwhelming, more like a familiar friend. "You heard it," Lumi said, its blue light pulsing with what Lyra could only describe as satisfaction. "You truly heard the silent song." Lyra could only nod, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She felt changed, utterly and irrevocably. The longing was gone, replaced by a quiet knowing. The universe hadn't given her a message, but an experience. It hadn't told her what to do, but shown her what was. "What? What do I do now?" she whispered, her voice still hoarse. "You live," Lumi responded simply. "You carry the song within you. You understand that Astraea is not a cage, but a choice. And Stellara is not a lost city, but a gateway to a greater understanding." Lyra spent more time in Stellara, not just exploring but absorbing. She walked through the silent halls, no longer seeking, but simply being present. She learned about the initiates' wisdom, their compassion, their extraordinary vision. She understood that sometimes, the greatest act of love is to let others find their own path, even if it's a different one. Eventually, the time came to return. Lumi guided her back through the atrium of whispers, through the winding tunnels back to the ventilation shaft that had been her escape route. "Will you stay here, Lumi?" Lyra asked, a pang of sadness in her chest. "My directive is here, but the core is active now. I will continue to observe. And if another seeker comes, I will guide them." Lumi hovered, its blue light softening. "Thank you, Lyra. Your resonance has brought much back to life." Lyra gave the small drone a gentle pat on its smooth surface. "Thank you, Lumi. For everything." She squeezed back into the shaft, the familiar metallic tang a strange comfort now. She pushed through, moving with a new grace, a new purpose. When she emerged back into Astraea, the hum of the manufactured city felt different. It was still the same, but her perception of it had changed. Astraea was still beautiful, still peaceful. But now, Lyra saw its beauty not as an end in itself, but as a deliberate choice, a gentle shelter. She moved through its pristine corridors, past its contented inhabitants, with a quiet strength she hadn't possessed before. She didn't speak of Stellara, not yet. How could she? The silent song wasn't something you explained, it was something you experienced. She returned to her small, tidy apartment, to her window that showed only the simulated sky. But now, when she looked at it, she didn't feel confined. She felt the vastness beyond it, the real stars, the cosmic dance she had witnessed. She carried the universe within her. Lyra sometimes sat by the window, closing her eyes, and she could still feel the echoes of the silent song. It wasn't a burden, but a profound gift. She knew that humanity on Astraea was safe, happy in their manufactured peace. And she knew that beyond that peace, the stars were still singing. A silent, eternal symphony for those brave enough to listen, for those ready to transcend. And Lyra, the girl who had once only dreamed of journeys, now carried an entire universe within her heart, a secret keeper of the silent song, her spirit finally at peace with the boundless wonder of existence. The darkness had held not fear, but truth, and she had stepped into it, listening to the universe's most ancient, most beautiful lullaby.